Welcome to the CAC's exhibition, Images on Which to Build, 1970s through 1990s. This exhibition is part of the 2022 Photo Focus Biennial, a regional celebration of photography and other lens-based art. Images on Which to Build tells the story of LGBTQIA+ artist, activist, and archivist from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. The exhibition is comprised of 6 sections, all of which focus on projects aimed at educating about queer life. The first, The Dyke Show by Jeb, is a digitized slideshow that was shown at least 80 times between 1979 and 1984. The Dyke Show comprises over 100 years of photographic history from a lesbian feminist perspective, peppered with humorous commentary on patriarchal fantasies of lesbians. Jeb introduced under-recognized photographers like Berenice Abbott, whose lesbian life was embedded in codes, and contemporaries like T. Corinne. When photo labs, camera clubs, and art schools were often hostile places for out lesbians, Jeb fostered emerging collectives and individual young photographers. Lola Flash's photographic work began in the late 1970s. Flash experimented in the darkroom by printing color transparency slide film on more affordable paper made for color negatives. This cross-color process reversed skin tones, challenging stereotypes about race. Flash was active in the affinity group Art Positive, fighting AIDS phobia, homophobia, and censorship in the arts. Between 1989 and 1992, Art Positive planned demonstrations, art interventions, and participated in HIV/AIDS-related group shows. Art Positive was, in part, mobilized by the 1987 Helms Amendment that prohibited federal funding for HIV/AIDS educational materials that referenced homosexuality. Diana Solis is an artist, photographer, educator, and activist who has been documenting and participating in grassroots educational projects for over 40 years. Solis came of age in the late 1960s, a time of student and parent-led protest in Chicago public schools to demand funding, renovations, and Chicano and Black Studies classes. This installation represents a fraction of Solis's photographic archive of the late 1970s, 80s, and 90s of over 8,000 mostly black and white 35mm images. Solis's work visualizes how learning happens intergenerationally within coalitions of social movement life. Keepin' On, Images of African American Lesbians is an exhibition co-curated by Lesbian Her Story Archives, or LHA, members Georgia Brooks, Paula Grant, and Morgan Grunwald, with technical support from Saskia Sheffer. For the original exhibition statement, Grant wrote, "Keepin' On was created to celebrate and honor the creativity and strength of the African American lesbian community." The title comes from a phrase Mabel Hampton used to say when she was working with us at the archives, "Keep on keepin' on," end quote. Like the other traveling exhibitions that LHA coordinators began to produce in the 1990s, Keepin' On was designed to be packed, mailed, repaired, and reinstalled. Presenting the prolific cultural and political work of Black lesbians, the Lesbian Her Story Archives defies the whitewashing of lesbian and feminist her stories and provides resources on queer Black her story. Electric Blanket AIDS Projection Project is a public art slideshow of photographs related to HIV/AIDS. The slideshow mixes portraits of recently passed loved ones, protest and demonstration slogans and imagery, statistics and photo essays on those living with HIV/AIDS. Created by Alan Frame, Frank Franca, and Nan Golden, with support from Visual Aids, Electric Blanket toured 52 times nationally and internationally for over a decade. Globally, 38.4 million people are still living with HIV/AIDS. Little Gems borrows a phrase that Louis Sullivan wrote in a letter to his friend Ben Power Alwyn, thanking him for sending a clipping about a gay trans man. Quote, "It's little gems like these, hidden in history, that we need to preserve for future female to males who think they're the only one." End quote. Before images of trans people became more publicly visible, empowerment and connection were found across geographical distances through slideshows, letters, and snapshots. One active member, Lauren Rex Cameron, taught himself photography to make images of fellow trans people within his local Bay Area network to combat misrepresentation and to demystify the process of hormones, surgeries, and the non-medical ways trans people come to live and love in their bodies.